Greetings. My name is Kevin Baird, and I'm the director of the pastoral ministries for the Florida Family Policy Council. And we're thrilled that you have joined us today for what I believe will be an important and impactful webinar. This webinar will be our third of 4 installments in the series, Christian Leadership in a Post-Pandemic World. Our previous webinars addressed the topics of reopening the church after a pandemic, and then the second one was reopening Florida and the economy, and that talked about the church as well. Both of these topics have drawn great interest from literally hundreds of pastors and leaders from across our state and really all over the nation. If you'd like to view any of those webinars, you can go to the website at flfamily.org or our resource website at covidchurchaid.org. Today's topic is using technology and data effectively in ministry. If the pandemic has underscored anything, it most certainly has emphasized the impact and need of technology. Online streaming and social media presence has been vital as churches have learned to do ministry as their congregants were following stay-at-home requests. Today's panelists are going to help resource us for not only our current needs, but how to respond to future needs. And if you have questions through the webinar, please ask them through the question and answer box that you'll find on this Zoom webinar, and we will do our best to cover your questions. Now, before I hand it over to our moderator, I want to share with you just a brief 60-second commercial concerning some things Florida Family is doing. A part of the vision of Florida Family is to resource and to assist pastors and churches in effectively engaging the crucial issues of our culture. One of those mission assignments is called the Florida Capital Project. The Capital Project connects pastors, who we consider to be shepherds of the church, and their civic representatives, who are shepherds, so to speak, of civil government. And according to Romans 13, we find this partnership taking place for prayer and moments of discipleship. The civic arena has been a neglected mission field for the gospel in the past. But this project has been an exciting opportunity for pastors to make a huge impact with civic leaders who candidly really desire our prayer and support. I would love the opportunity to share more about the Florida Capital Project, as it is a nonpartisan, kingdom-driven biblical ministry that puts the gospel front and center. It's a refreshing template for pastors and churches to participate in the outreach to the leaders of our state. And you can contact me simply at kevin@floridacapitalproject.org. Now, to begin the webinar, I want to hand it over to our host and moderator who will lead us in this discussion, the president of Florida Family, John Stemberger.
Thanks, Kevin. Welcome to all of you that have dialed in. I apologize for the robocalls. We don't do that often, but this is really important what we're doing today. It's very strategic for the advancement of the gospel and the building of the kingdom through the local church. First of all, we want to say, help us. If you want to go the extra mile, if you can get on your iPhone and find the Facebook page for Florida Family Policy Council and share this live stream, or if you're on Facebook right now listening to it, to go ahead and share this. It'll help us a lot exponentially get this content out to other pastors and ministry leaders, not just in Florida, but throughout the country. So please share this on Facebook to give us extra boost in our promotion of what we're going to hear today. So before we start with our first speaker, who's very prominent and I'm very thrilled to have with us, I want to talk a little bit about a theology of technology. And I think that, anytime we're talking about an issue in culture, there's usually some tension that we have to manage. And as you know, if you follow our page and our leadership, we're very concerned about technology on the brain of children and just young people growing up, the oversaturation of technology. So on one hand, I think when we're talking about children and the raising of children, there's this building in and blocking out stuff. We're building in the good stuff, blocking out the bad stuff, and there's a real concern and risk for technology. But I think on the other hand, the church also has to leverage technology. We can't pretend like it's not there and just close down. We have to actually use technology to the advancement of the gospel. And so I think that all of this I mean, think about what the COVID crisis would have been like just 10 years ago or 20 years ago. We would not be able to connect at all. We would have been isolated without. So this technology has given us a wonderful common grace means for the church to connect with each other and to be strategic in having the relationships that we can't have face to face for obvious reasons. And so we're very excited to present this to you today. You're going to hear some of this is going to be kind of theoretical and theological, but for the most part, we're going to unpack several tools. These are state-of-the-art technology tools that you can use in your ministry, in your church, to help reach new people, to help connect better with your existing members, and to really advance your mission in a way that's it's unprecedented we've had before. And so I'm very excited to present what we're going to present here. And we're not, none of us on this call would say that any of this replaces human relationships. I think one of the things that's been profound in this whole process is to realize that Christianity is all about physical proximity to each other, right? Whether it's communion, whether it's fellowship, small groups. I mean, the Christian life is not meant to be lived alone. Whereas in Hinduism or in Buddhism, you can actually live alone and achieve a state of moksha or nirvana apart from the collective or the temple. You can't do that in Christianity. It necessarily means the church is with other people. But this technology is a means to introduce the relationship where we can have that direct contact. So without any further ado, I want to introduce our first speaker. David Kinnaman is a gentleman that I have known of for a while, but had the privilege of just meeting recently. He is the author of a number of books. He's the president of the Barna Group. And actually, George Barna is a friend of mine. I've gotten to know him through national coalition meetings around the country. And I emailed him and said, George, can you come on this webinar and talk about state of the church and the Pulse survey? And he said, you know what? I'll tell you a guy that's better, David Kinnaman. So I called David, and he's very gracious to be with us today. But he's president of the Barna Group. He's author of several best-selling books on Christian, You Lost Me, Good Faith. Faith for Exiles is his most recent book. This is an outstanding book trying to help Christian leaders understand basically where the next generation is at in their thinking, how they're processing, how to connect with them. So if you're at all interested in reaching millennials, Gen X, and other folks of that nature who are younger than most of us on this call, this is the go-to resource. I want to encourage you to get this book on Amazon, and it's just a great resource. But David has really worked with over 500 ministries, advising clients from InterVarsity to Salvation Army, World Vision, Zondervan. His resume is extensive as a consultant to groups. He also speaks widely around the country. He's been on news sources, all the national media, and so we're very pleased to have him with us. He's also a lifelong pastor, so he understands ministry, and he has most important of all, his wife, Jill, and him live in Ventura, California, and he has 3 children. So David, thank you for being with us, and we look forward to your presentation today.
Yeah, thank you, John. I really appreciate that. It's a really kind of you to say all that, and it's so great to be with you today here through screens. And we're living in the screen age, and we're able to join you now through screens. And as you said, John, COVID is forcing all of us into some new rhythms and some new practices. But it's God's grace that we're able to use technology in the way that we are to get through this unprecedented time. So I've been asked to give a little bit of context, and I love the phrase "a theology of technology." It's not actually used often enough, in my humble opinion, and for us as believers, as Christians, to begin to see technology as God's gift, and then to think about how we use tools and technology as part of our mission in the world. Martin Luther said that the printing press was God's agent of grace, and he understood that it was part of the promulgation of the gospel in new and unprecedented ways. And so what I want to talk about today a little bit is some research we're doing about state of the church, and I'm going to share my screen here and give you guys some perspective on some of the things that we're seeing. I first want to emphasize that a lot of what I've been studying, as John said, is related to how we can show up for our kids and our grandkids. I have 3 children of my own, 20, almost 21, 19, and 15. We're all living in the house together under COVID, and so it's been very interesting. My two oldest are off at college usually, but they've been home. It's like I've got 2 extra roommates in the house. They're sort of like we're renegotiating those relationships. It's been very interesting. But I spent a lot of my work trying to understand the perspectives of these emerging generations and really try to wake up the church to the issues and concerns that young people have been expressing. And years ago, as a youth pastor in our local church here in Ventura, California, a young woman in the youth group was graduating, and she came and asked, what would the Bible have to say about selling my eggs? And we had no quite idea what that meant. We thought she lived in an apartment and didn't realize that she wasn't talking about backyard chickens. But she had found online a fertility clinic, and for thousands of dollars, she could donate her eggs. She could sell her eggs. And so that was the first moment that I remember sort of the mashup of technology, of the internet, of, sort of search functions and, sort of human need in some very interesting ways. And so I want to say that I believe that COVID is actually doing this, that COVID is actually going to accelerate a lot of needed changes in the church. And the reason I say that is because we've been living in a screen age. We've come to realize the book Faith for Exiles really unpacks the idea that we're doing dial-up ministry in a Wi-Fi world. We're doing dial-up ministry in a Wi-Fi world. We can't simply have young people, our kids, our grandkids, 15 years old, 19 years old. We can't just have them a week, an hour a week. We've got to be able to influence more of their lives, and local churches, as good as we're doing in so many areas, we've got a lot more work to do. And I think this moment gives us an opportunity to rethink discipleship and to think about the different ways that's happening. So I'm going to show you a little bit of data that we've been collecting. You expect that from a Barna guy. And so we've been looking for the last number of years at the integration between sort of physical and digital, and obviously in North America today, we have this awesome opportunity or privilege, I'd say, of sort of all different ways in which people can get Christian content. We have an incredible ecosystem for Christian content and Christian organizations. Now, a lot of that's changing, and I'm going to talk about that in just a minute. It's sort of the pressures are changing how we show up as Christian organizations and Christian leaders. But Christian radio, Christian books and publishing, Christian social media, Christian television, listening to a sermon or podcast, aside from from your church, but not being at the same location. And all of this was pre-COVID. And so you can see that about half of Americans say they often, about half the time, or occasionally use some of these resources instead of attending a church. And this is among practicing Christians, which means these are people that are already attend church. So it's not as though they're using this to replace all of their church attendance. It's just that they're using this to augment their spiritual lives. And I think that's a wonderful thing. And check this out. So when we look at generational differences, boomers, only 11% prior to COVID, 24% of Gen Xers, and nearly half of millennials are using this sort of worship shifting. They're using these tools that I just mentioned. So here's one of the great opportunities that I think we have, which is to recognize that we're living in this disruptive age. We're living in a period where people are attending and participating, and they're using technology. And I think that COVID, I'm so proud of the way churches have shown up over the last number of weeks, over the last 2 months. We've been hearing on this new podcast that I've been hosting with my friend Carrie Newhoff, Church Pulse Weekly, all the innovative ways that churches are showing up to help. And I'm so proud of what we're doing, how we're doing it. And I'm just asking us to consider how we're going to respond to the deeper disruptions that are taking place. And let me show you a little bit of what I mean by that. Here's some things, just kind of some high level perspectives that we've been gaining through the last number of years. There's increasing skepticism of the church and of Christianity. I've been here for 25 years. As you said, George Barna started the company in 1984. I started working with him in 1995. We've been tracking this for 25 years, and there's certainly increasing skepticism of the church and of Christianity, especially among younger generations, and especially among younger non-Christians. There's a widening gap between what we call insiders and outsiders. People are increasingly open about their lives. I think that's an incredible opportunity. They're willing to share. They're willing to talk about their issues and concerns. They don't always have the right perspectives about those things. That's where a gospel, Bible-centered, church can help to reframe them about human sin and our need for redemption. But people are open about their lives in ways that are really, really amazing and a great opportunity for the gospel. People bring a range of emotional expectations with them every week. to their relationship with institutions, which leads me to the next point here, that new digital tools are changing how people relate to institutions. And I think post-COVID, this will be one of the really lasting sort of changes that people are really renegotiating how they will interact with institutions. Think of higher education, right? And distance learning and now distance sort of worship. We're seeing in some of our research already that it's something about 30% of practicing Christians say that they're not attending any kind of worship service, even digitally, even though they would have ordinarily been pretty active. And then another group of people are sort of mixing and matching with a variety of churches. I think that's generally a good thing. But COVID's going to change people's relationships to the local churches. And we're already seeing that as much as people want to come back to church, there's still a lot of anxiety about coming back and in what way they will come back and whether they bring their kids and their teenagers. So, younger generations generally have been bringing new questions and anxieties to their relationships with the church. Happy to talk more about that. It's a huge issue. Life in the anxious age. Sincerity is less often understood or appreciated. Authority is shifting from external to internal, from internal to external sources. So lots of interesting things that I think we could point to. Now, what I want to just sort of close my few comments here, and then happy to interact with you about this. We have an opportunity, I believe, to disciple people in a deeper way. And for me, as a Christian, as a dad, as someone who wants to see the church thrive, I think we should look at this crisis as an opportunity to use technology and to disciple people in a deeper way, partly based on that. Let me give you an example of how we've been doing that. We've been working with a technology company in Boulder called Gloo. You're going to be hearing a little bit more about some of the tools we've been building, but we've been working on one set of data that allows for you as church leaders and as Christians to check in on your community, check in on those in your church. This is from March 19th through April 8th. We had 20,000 congregants respond about their average levels of isolation. And you can notice here that younger generations are even more likely to say they feel isolated than older generations. Here's a double click on some of these different things that we were asking in this check-in data. You're going to be hearing more about this in just a minute, but we looked at physical health, a lack of anxiety, financial stress, income disruption, having friends and family around you, others to count on, feeling called to serve in this moment, job disruption, peace, hope. What do you notice as you look through the different generations? Again, this is all data from local congregations like yours who have deployed this really cool free technology that we've been building called the Church Pulse and Church Check-In. And what this tells us is that we can start to understand a little bit more about the pressure points that different people in our congregations are feeling as cohorts, as groups. You can look at male versus female, younger versus older, et cetera. But notice that younger generations are actually feeling a lot of pressure. They're expressing a lot of anxiety by comparison to older adults. They're tracking lower when it comes to financial stress and income disruption and job disruption. All across the board, younger people are actually more vulnerable in the psychological and mental health issues and vocational issues than our older adults. And remember, we've been talking a lot about protecting the vulnerable older adults in our communities, and that's a good thing in terms of their health, but recognizing that we can have a better picture into what's happening in the hearts and minds of people. So here's our conclusion. That leaders need new ways to measure the church's influence in real lives so that we can care for our people where it matters most. Leaders need new ways to measure the church's influence in real lives so that we can care for our people where it matters most. And if you think back to the story I began with, this young friend of mine, Colette, who asked, does the church have anything to say about selling my eggs, right? And she was facing, actually, it turned out, some financial difficulties in her life. She was looking to go on to college, and she was in a single parent home, and she was curious about how she could make some money going out of high school, and all of a sudden this new opportunity was presented to her online, and so we ended up breaking down. My best friend Eddie Ramos and I broke down, as he was the youth pastor, I was a volunteer. We started saying, okay, let's talk about what are some of the underlying issues, and we were connected in with some of the issues that she was concerned about. And I think what we're seeing in this COVID moment, especially because of the isolation, and we're all sheltering at home, or we're all trying to form sort of new patterns of working and worshiping and sort of just living is that people are feeling very isolated, especially younger generations. And we have a great opportunity today to come alongside this generation and help them stay even more connected to the things that matter most, which is the Lord in their lives, which is understanding Jesus, which is beginning to see how God connects to every part of their life, not just their Sunday morning worship or their sort of their Christian background. And you know, it's a huge issue, because just to put a number on it, let me just get out of my go this direction here. 64% of 18 to 29-year-olds who grow up as a Christian in this country will walk away from faith or will walk away from the church. And that means that some of them will call themselves Christians, but they won't be very Christian in their life. That's a lot of what the Faith for Exiles project was all about, was trying to learn what are the things we can really do to make a difference in the lives of these young people. And I love this verse, 2 Corinthians 11, 28 through 29, where Paul says he has a daily burden for his concern for the churches. And I know when we think about, you know, John, your work with churches in Florida, you know, it's like we have this daily concern about how it is the church is going to show up in sort of civic engagement. And as we said at the very beginning, like, you know, sort of civic mission is an underrepresented part of Christian mission today. And we have this daily burden of how the church is going to show up in places like California and places like Florida. Who is weak without me feeling that weakness? Who is led astray and I do not burn with anger, Paul says. And so when I see the 64%, man, I burn with anger about the opportunities that we have, the great opportunities that we have to disciple differently. And this is what we learned in our research, was that there are these different practices that we could engage with, helping people experience Jesus and talk to him, having cultural discernment and building our lives on scripture, having meaningful relationships with other Christians such that we want to become like them, vocational discipleship, where we really try to help shape life and Christian mission in the workplace and in terms of career and calling, and then countercultural mission, which relates to our evangelistic, sacrificial, you know, sort of giving of ourselves sort of lives that Jesus requires. So those are some of the things we've been learning when it comes to effective discipleship. And all of this has been we've been studying this for many, you know, years, decades. And just this, you know, like this last couple of years, we've been studying what does it take for us to create resilient young disciples. And we're seeing the pressure points that is just, you know, exerting on the church, because we're not actually, as churches, always capable of sort of staying up to speed with the issues and concerns that this generation is feeling. So how can we use this moment to go deeper into a core conviction and practice of the church, which is discipleship? And so again, I actually think I'm so excited about this crisis. It's been hard on so many of us, and I think vulnerable communities, whether impoverished communities or, you know, those that are lower income, who are having to work, you know, or work outside the home, don't have the privileges that we have. You know, there's all sorts of issues and concerns we should concern ourselves with, and rightly show up for those who've lost life and lost income and lost, you know, sort of, you know, abuse and addiction. All these things are going to be coming out of the COVID crisis. But this means that you as church leaders have a responsibility to be even more connected to the heart of what people are facing, and how it is that your church can show up and be light in that those challenging circumstances. And I think it's just an awesome opportunity for us as pastors and as leaders to begin to show what it means to really pastor. I mean, for a lot of the last few years, we've been seeing the public trust in pastors is declining, and the relevance of pastors is declining. Well, this is a great moment that many of us are already showing up to show the light of what it is to be the church, and to be a community founded on what Jesus says about us. So thank you so much for having me, you know, be a part of this. And John, I'd be happy to take any questions that, you know, are pinging around in your brains or in our participants today.
Sure. So if you're listening to this webinar and you have a question, if you go to the bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A question. Put a question in there that specifically relates to what David has shared. That'd be great. We did get a question about your book again. So it's Faith for Exiles by David Kinnaman. And so this is the book that we recommended for you that better unpacks what he just talked about. I have a question, David. So obviously everybody's trying to reach the next generation. That's a given. But what do we know about our seniors? What do we know about the seasoned saints? Where are they at with technology? How many of them have integrated in terms of Facebook and smartphones? And are we leaving them out by kind of genning up this high-tech world within the context of our church?
Well, I think COVID reminds us how much everyone is using technology. Obviously, there's a little bit of, sort of bringing some people up to speed, perhaps. I know in our family, my parents use technology a little bit differently than the grandkids do, but they use it as much or more. They're like, trading stuff on eBay and busy on Facebook. And so I think this is one of the great gifts of technology, isn't it? That it has, with some exceptions, it truly is an intergenerational set of tools, and COVID has forced people to use it even more. Again, I think it's a both and answer, which is that the church shouldn't just rely on screen-based, technology-based tools. But if we don't have sort of digital strategy, digital discipleship ideas, then we're going to miss great opportunities. So here's a good example of one thing on a youth group level that I think I've seen that's been pretty effective, is that the most effective churches are saying to their youth leaders, especially now during COVID, like, hey, we don't want to just like you to replicate the youth group experience, but use technology to recommend podcasts, to recommend YouTube channels, to recommend tools that can, like young people are consuming a lot of stuff already. Let's try to fill that pipeline with other better content. Because there's a lot of wonderful material out. I mean, Ravi Zacharias, who's, very sick with cancer right now, let's introduce a whole generation to Ravi Zacharias, lectures and talks. Let's introduce people to the great debates about, sort of faith, because they're going to find it anyway. So let's have them find that within the context of a youth group and a trusted community. Now, how that then relates to older generations is I actually see that older generations are really sort of sitting on the sidelines, ready to be activated in mentoring roles and what we call reverse mentoring or reciprocal mentoring roles. That's really one of the interesting things that we're seeing in the data, is that older adults, we just were looking at some data yesterday, we'll be releasing next week. Older adults aren't as vulnerable. They're vulnerable physically to COVID, obviously, because for underlying health reasons and respiratory disease, but their income is much more fixed. There's a sense of, even though this is unprecedented, that it's sort of like, well, life has crazy times, doesn't it? And so I think the church is the one place where different generations show up to serve each other and to serve a common cause. And so when you ask about issues related to older adults, I think they're actually more willing to show up and be challenged to help mentor and develop this next generation than sometimes churches are structured to do that. And this COVID moment reminds us of opportunities for that. My daughter, who's home from school, she goes to school up in the Bay Area. She's gotten 2 or 3 like handwritten notes from some of the seasoned saints in her church saying, hey, we really miss you. We can't wait to see you back on campus and back on church. And that's just a really cool way of saying, hey, older adults, you got a role to play in reminding this anxious, sort of pressure-filled generation. And let's not forget that the job prospects, the challenges facing this millennial Gen Z generation, they're massive. They really do face an uncertain future. And so the older adults in our congregation could say, hey, remember where we put our deepest identity. We miss you. We want to see you back. And I think there's a great way for us, just, as pastors, not to try to do all this relational lifting ourselves. We can actually try to enlist others in this great opportunity of staying better connected in a time of disruption.
David, this is Tim here. One of the things that I've been listening to the weekly podcast with you and Carrie, great job keeping us informed. Also, a great way for us to sort of accelerate our learning in how to use data and become a pollster inside of our own churches, which is great. But one of the things that struck me as I've been watching and listening to the story kind of unfold over the last 8 weeks is this idea that so many churches up to this point have measured the success of the metric of success, butts and seats. How many folks are watching online? Did they stay for more than 3 seconds? Things that don't matter. And now all of a sudden, the new measurement seems to be human flourishing. Can you just touch on that one more time?
Be happy to. And when I showed you this slide here that relates to these different dimensions of what we call flourishing, there's a role for us as disciple makers, as churches, to create people who flourish in all of their lives, right? In their hope and in their peace and in the spiritual development of life, but also in their vocation and their relationships and their financial well-being and their physical well-being. It's just got sort of, the New Testament says that Christianity isn't just for sort of life hereafter, but for the life that is. And sort of like, how will we be a witness in the world of the kind of flourishing communities that care for one another and are able to be sacrificial. So we've been working alongside our partners in Boulder on this sort of thesis of human flourishing. We've drawn on 35 years of Barna's work. We've looked at other research in the field about what does it mean for people to flourish. And we're just so excited to be able to then give tools to leaders. All this is available for free on a new tool set called Barna Access. And churchpulseweekly.com, and you'll hear more about that in just a minute. But this idea of really looking at, as you're saying, Tim, looking deeper than just did they show up, but how are they doing, and in what ways are they growing? Can we track their development over time? Because we believe that discipling people means we've got to disciple all of their lives, not just their spiritual response. We're not just trying to get them into heaven and saved. We're trying to get them saved for the purpose of life on mission with Jesus in their whole life. And so that's an exciting opportunity, I think, for the church today.
That's fantastic. David, you also have, we've got a big webinar that's going to be happening. Is it next week, the State of the Church? That might also be interested for this group.
Yeah, be happy to say something about that. So next week, we've got a webcast, a free webcast called Caring for Souls in a New Reality. Caring for Souls in a New Reality, May 20th. It's next Wednesday. You can sign up at stateofthechurch.com or at barna.com/state of the church. Either one of those will work. And we've got the webcast will happen. We've got some great guests that are coming on. We've got 4 workshops, reopening the church, leading through crisis, how to use this Church Pulse tool, and then engaging the next generation. And so you can sign up for one of the workshops, you can sign up for the webcast, and we'd love to have you learn more about some of these tools that we've been working on and just prepare you, equip you. We're going to be praying together. We're going to be worshiping together next week, and we'd just be delighted to have you join us.
So David, we have a couple of questions, and if you could just give us laser answers. We had a brief technology glitch, but go ahead, Kevin. We have at least one question we can ask. So I've got a question here regarding small churches. What advice do you have for small churches with limited resources?
Last week in the Church Pulse weekly podcast with Carrie and I, we actually talked about small and mid-sized churches. And so I'd encourage you to listen to that podcast. It's called Church Pulse Weekly. But essentially, remember that you have some opportunities to create real and deep relationships that in a moment when people are feeling really disconnected, small churches can really show up with the relationship connections that we really know each other. We got everyone's on each other's cell numbers and speed dial, right? And so lean into the advantages that you have. Don't try to be something that you're not. Don't try to feel like you've got to compete against other people that are doing digital church better. Recommend other churches to people. They're going to do it anyway. So, hey, go ahead and listen to some of those other sermons. If you want to worship along with another church that's doing some cool digital stuff, do it, because we're here for you in other ways as well. The church is not just, this tiny little community, right? It's not a big mega church. It's not a tiny community. It's all of us together worshiping. So feel free to, have an abundance mindset related to worship and worship practices. Give people the permission to worship as they need to, as they're being, as we're trying to make our way through this very disruptive time.
Great. Well, David, thank you so much for being with us and giving us kind of the big picture before we get into the tools now that folks can use. We really appreciate you being with us.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Thank you so much, friends, for inviting me to be a part of it, and just wishing you well. Stay well, and enjoy your unprecedented summer coming up.
Great. So our next guest is Tim Popadic. I've known Tim many years. We have had many missions together, many crazy experiences. So he is a good friend, but he has been in ministry for over 20 years. His last position was director at discipleship and marriage at Christ Fellowship, which is a very significant church with satellite campuses out of Palm Beach Gardens. In 2010, actually, along with our ministry, launched the national date night campaign through Chick-fil-A. And we actually did an intense marriage strengthening issue with all the Chick-fil-A operators in Palm County. But he's been instrumental in creating campaigns all over the country, and churches to help marriages, strengthen marriages, and strengthen their churches, and is now associated with a company called Gloo. And so he's done that since 2011. So Tim, thanks for being with us. And let's talk about the tools that pastors can now use.
Thank you, John. You know, it has been just a thrill to serve churches. Coming from the ministry, I know just how grueling and a grind it can be for pastors. And having served here in South Florida, I feel like I'm one of you. So, and yes, John, we've been on some crazy adventures together. So we share our love of the Christian chicken, Chick-fil-A there, but we also know what it's like to really kind of step out and do some great things with technology. And so I'm going to share with you now what the mission that we've been on as a company. Gloo is David referred to Gloo as really the technology and the capability behind what's being built out for Barna in this moment. And as you know, Barna every 10 years releases a state of the church where they go in and kind of like the US Census, they go in and they create this opportunity for the church to kind of see better, do better. And this year we came alongside of them and said, hey, we've got these great tools that we'd like to help measure the church in this moment. And again, this was 6 months ago. So we worked alongside of Barna to actually create an opportunity for churches to begin to poll their congregations. And it was pretty ironic and maybe providential that in the moment of our big release to churches was actually back on March 10th. And as you remember, John, I believe it was March 11th that the president came on and basically shut down the country. And so what we did at Gloo is in Barna, we took all of our capabilities and our tool set and we flipped them on for churches to use 100% free and begin to touch base, check in with their congregants. I want to show you a video now on how we are rolling this out across the state of Florida. And I want you to know that everything that you see represented on this video is 100% free to you forever. And also, in addition to that, we're going to show you how to jump in, log in, and create your account today. So let me start by just sharing this brief video.
Huge impact with civic leaders.
In times of crisis, people
really
are in need
desire
of guidance,
our prayer and support.
and assurances.
I would love the opportunity
This becomes
to
especially
share more
true
about the Florida
when
Capital
preventative
Project,
measures like
as it is
social
a
distancing
nonpartisan,
impact the
kingdom-driven
traditional
biblical
way
ministry
people
that
live
puts
their
the
everyday
gospel
lives.
front and center.
As a
It's
leader,
refreshing
connecting
template
with your
for pastors
people
and churches
and
to
helping them
participate
flourish
in
amidst
the
today's
outreach to
changing
the leaders of
landscape
our
is
state.
more
And you
important
can
than ever.
contact me simply at
As the trusted platform for personal growth,
FloridaCapitalProject.org.
we at Gloo want to help you do
Now, to
just
begin the
that.
webinar,
That's
I
why
want
we've
to hand it
partnered
over
with
to our
Barna
host
to
and
offer you
moderator
a set
who
of
will lead us in
free,
this discussion, the
customizable
president of
check-ins
Florida
that you
Family,
can give to
John
your
Stemberger.
people periodically to
Thanks,
see
Kevin.
how they're doing amidst today's challenges. These customizable surveys can be given to your people or leaders to better assess their health and areas of need around topics like personal well-being, finances, calling to serve, and perceptions of your organization. You can personalize the survey to your organization by adding up to 10 of your own custom questions. Give these short check-ins to your audience each week so you can understand changes and needs over time. And as your people take the check-in each week, you'll get real-time visibility into the results so you can make timely and informed decisions on what to do next. Register at mypeoplecheck-in.com to get started now.
So that was some of the resource called the check-in. And what I'm going to share with you right now is essentially how to start your experience with Gloo and the check-in here with Barna. So John, I'm going to walk through this. I'm sure people are going to have some questions. And as they have questions, why don't you call those out and I'll do my best to answer them. But let me get started by saying that this is for every church and every organization that is meeting the needs of people across Florida. And so this is how you start. You go to mypeoplecheck-in.com/Florida family. All right. And it will take you to this special page. You'll recognize the Florida Family logo, the Barna logo. If you scroll down, you'll recognize this guy right here. Okay. So we know him well. But this is the site, and you click on here, it says get started for free. As soon as you click on the get started for free, it will take you to a page much like this, where you can go in, you could create your absolutely free account. It's going to ask you just a series of quick questions. If you already have an account, if you've ever made an account inside of Gloo before, it might ask you to remember the account. You could do that. The first place you're going to drop is a place right here. This is the landing, one of the first landing pages is going to take you to. And what you do is up here on the top navigation, there's a place that we call the 9 box. You just click over the 9 box, and this is more or less your menu of how to interact. We're going to ask you to go to Gloo Home. And then once you get into the Gloo Home, then you're going to have all of the tools unlocked for you here. So inside of the Gloo Home, I created an organization. I just call it Healing Encounter Nights. Your organization could be First Baptist, whatever, or Church of God, whatever, or your church, whatever, right here. That's where that will appear. And then again, you'll have access to all of these really cool tools that I'm about to walk you through. So the first thing that I want to draw your attention to when you get to the Gloo Home is going to be the pastor poll. Now the pastor poll, as David mentioned, is a national poll. This is a poll that crosses pastors across the country. We ask them a different question, a series of questions every week. All of that data comes together and we're able to produce this pretty cool poll. And this is an example of like the current pastor poll results, right? So if local governments continue to recommend small gatherings, how will your church respond, right? And so this is the type of information you can see. Some of the trends, you could see it from this week, you could see it over time. It gives you a whole bunch of resources that, again, as pastors, you might want to know, hey, how are we, the big church, doing across the country? And so this is happening, again, every week. At the end of each week, at the beginning on Monday, we release a webinar, and then it gets produced into a podcast called the Weekly Pulse and Weekly Church Pulse. We'd love for you to check that out. It's a great place for you to land each and every week. The other thing you could do is you could create what David talked about were these check-ins. And this is where you become the pollster to your congregants, right? You can check in with them. You can discover what their needs are. There's all kinds of ways for you to create, everything. So like inside of here, we have a whole library. If you click on the library, you'll see this is a whole library of different check-ins that are available. So you could do the latest one that we've been pushing out with, unique questions right here. You could also click that on and actually add questions to it. You can add up to 10 questions. All of it is anonymized data that's, depersonalized. You could send that out. If you did want to do an assessment where you push it out and you need to know specific needs for real people, there is a way for them to opt in to share their data with you also so that you can help them in real time. So there's all kinds of check-ins and assessments that you can access here, the pastor polls here as well. The next thing that's on this box is things as the community services directory and a few other different things like that. So if I go over here and I hit community services directory, this is what it's going to show me. So this is a great way. Now that when I shared this with Kevin and John, they got super excited. But this is a map of Florida, and you could see all these green dots are beginning to pop up all over Florida. These are churches. These are churches that are registering as organizations inside of the network of Florida Family. And when a church registers their organization, they could do a few things. So one thing, if you look over here, again, there's all kinds of organizations that can register here, but it's a map, a community services map, where you could begin to let everybody know what kinds of things in real time your church is doing to help in this moment. Now, I know we're currently looking at the COVID moment, and that's super important, but there's going to be things that are going to come out of this COVID moment. There's going to be marriages that need to be saving. There's going to be, folks who are going to need food. There's going to be folks that go into, drug abuse issues where they need to contact a great resource. This is a great place for you as a church to register the different things that you have to offer. So the goal, John and I would love to see 10,000 churches across Florida register their orgs today and begin to populate this map so we can begin to see what's happening in real time.
So Tim, let me just ask you a question real quick. So many churches are now thinking about re-entering the physical world, holding services again. Could this be a tool to survey people? Has anyone had COVID? How are you ready? How you feel about, we're going to launch on this date. How do you feel about that? We're going to do 3 or 4 services. How do you feel about that? Does anyone need help? I mean, would this be a good way to kind of survey people for their kind of thoughts and fears and what's going on with them before they get to that place of reopening?
That's great. So we just started, we've got a whole new check-in here called Returning to Check-in, Returning to Church Check-in, right? So when I click this, it is an entire assessment and survey that you could push out to your congregation to find out how they feel about returning to church. I mean, what a great way for you to know in real time. And again, it's amazing to me, like in this moment, how folks are going to begin to jump in, and it would be awful for us to jump in too early and then all of a sudden close the doors again. So I think part of that is going to be, how are we going to respond in this moment? What does that plan look like? And getting the pulse of where your church is at, I think is super important. Again, all this is free. When you configure this assessment, you can send it out as a text message. You could send it out as a QR code. You could send it out as an email. All of those things are free in here. You just go in and figure it. By the way, John, I'm going to be available to any church that wants to figure out how to do this. We're going to drop a series of videos with you over the next few weeks to help these churches and organizations begin to plot away and figure it out. I do want to show you one more thing here, John.
So let's go back to the landing page where they start out, just so that they can take that down or do it on their phone or whatever it is.
Yeah, I'll go right back there. So it's called mypeoplecheck-in.com/Florida family /Florida family. mypeoplecheck-in.com/Florida family. And this is going to take you to the landing site that we've worked with John to put up. It's just to help connect the dots, get you right into the Gloo engine here for us so that we can populate this. Yeah.
Now, after a pastor does a survey, is there like charts and graphs to show the numeric results of the survey? So maybe share that with elders or deacons.
Yeah, they'll be able to show the actual outcomes. And so like, imagine you're able to, like in here, returning to church. Can I see a preview of the assessment? View on completion. Here's a review of the preview. Hold on one second. It looks kind of like this, the activity, where it'll show literally a bar graph of what's happening in real time. And you're able to see the results, just like I showed you with that other report. And so it's super clean. It's super easy. It's not very fancy. So like you don't have to be David Kinnaman to be able to, interpret what the results are. But one thing too, John, I want to show you, I shared earlier.
So I have a quick question because
go ahead.
Time. I want to make sure we're getting to this.
Yeah. Folks
are wanting to know about privacy and about third-party usage. In other words, is there people's data that they're collecting? Is that being collected by Gloo, or is it anonymous? And are they going to start getting emails from outside emails other than Gloo?
No, they won't. They won't be getting any outside emails. So this is so it's all anonymized data. It's de-identified. So you're getting the curated view of what's happening in real time inside your church. Same with the pastor poll and all that stuff. So it's your data is 100% protected. It's not. We're not asking you to load data up, right? That's not what's going on. But we are helping you in this moment to poll. The only time where that would be slightly different is if you went in and configured an assessment and actually asked people like a mandatory, we want your names. For instance, I need food this week, right? I need somebody to come visit me. Like if that was the level of assessment question that you were asking, you probably do want to know who the answer is to. So there is an ability that you have to create as an option where they can actually identify that they actually need help. That's a little unique, but that is what's happening. And that would be for your congregation. One other thing I just wanted to highlight, David alluded to it, is called Barna Access. So we have a bunch of tools in here, and so where you find it, you go back to that 9 box and you click on Barna Access. And inside of the 9 box with Barna Access, it'll give you, like, you could actually see the pastor poll results in here, right? You can see the latest, you can hear the latest webinar on Church Pulse Weekly. You can catch up if you haven't been watching these with Carrie Newhoff and David Kinnaman. And again, the folks that they've had on have been unbelievable. Each and every week it's been different. They've had some great, it's been engaging, but it's also been extremely informative in ways to really kind of get behind things. So that's just a quick little tutorial, John. I mean, there are other things that we could cover in here, but I think each and every week, the most important thing was I wanted to make sure that people know how to access this free resource. That would be, go to mypeoplecheck-in.com/Florida Family. Again, our goal is to populate all of the state of Florida. So if you've got a small church, if you've got a large church, go in, create an organization. If you go in through the portal and it looks like somebody's already claimed you as an organization, you can actually go back in, click, reset this password, and we can figure out, we could troubleshoot. If you're having difficulty logging in, it could be that somebody in your church, a very well-meaning deacon or a very well-meaning associate pastor already registered you and you don't know it. So that could be the case, and we'll help begin to identify you and then put you on the roadmap, right? So here's Reverb Church as an example. These guys are in St. Augustine, Florida. These are the programs that Reverb Church has. So shout out to Reverb Church. I've never met you, but you're awesome. This looks great. They're doing counseling, online sermons, community groups, prayer, free meals, grocery delivery. So, hey, they're better than Shipped. So you want to make sure that you get all of your resources in there so you can meet the needs in real time. And again, John, I think about when hurricanes hit the state of Florida, like how can we mobilize as a church? What does this look like? When it comes to voting, like how could we help the church, begin to speak out on cultural issues and different things? There are all kinds of opportunities that having a community services directory will help us with. So listen, I want to let you ask any other questions, but let people know that we're going to be around, and we'll be happy to jump in and help them and guide them through this process. John, you're on mute.
Yeah, we're ready to move to our next speaker. If you want to move to the speaker mode again and stop the screen share.
Done. Great.
So I'm very pleased to introduce our next speaker, J.P. Gance. JP has done quite a bit of work around the country. So I'm very pleased to have him. JP, why don't you just say something real quick? I want your face to come up there. Gallery view, there you are. Great. So he has had a 2-decade career in philanthropy, working with a variety of organizations, including the Philanthropy Roundtable, and has worked at a very high level of policy and national organizations, and basically saw that really change has to take place in culture and real people's lives, and basically did a shift from working with groups that are very significant in Washington, D.C., like Americans for Prosperity, to doing more relational work in understanding human relationships and marriage and family structures. And so that's where he, with Communio now, does this. He has a remarkable tool. There is a cost to this particular tool, but it's a way that you can use data to basically find out who is in around your church and to mobilize that for your use. So JP, go ahead and take the floor.
And of course, there's actually even a number of free resources that we provide to churches as well. But I'll go ahead and share my screen as we get started. It's great to be, hopefully you guys can see this. There we go. It's really great to be talking to so many folks in Florida. I grew up in Pompano Beach, Florida. And of course, I'm a diehard Gator, multi-generational. It's a genetic problem that runs in the family. So glad to glad to be able to live. My wife and I, we have 8 beautiful kids, and we've lived in Virginia for about 15 years and get down, see my family down there frequently. So I was excited about so much of what Tim and David had to say. So much of this is incredibly relevant to the here and now, and what your churches can be doing. And I'm just going to try to add to that. Many of you that are new to Communio, we're a non-for-profit, and we consult with churches, equipping them with tools to ultimately, these tools are bleeding edge technologies and strategies. We leverage Gloo, among other things, to help churches strengthen relationships, singles, marrieds, those engaged, and those who are in marital crisis. But it's been said a couple times on this. I want to really emphasize this. Ultimately, our shared goal is Christ-centered. We want to serve you in ultimately discipling and bringing and introducing more people to Jesus Christ by evangelizing and discipling relationships and marriages, okay? So we're going to talk about a lot of technology and strategies. Sometimes we can get one step removed from that key idea, and ultimately we believe that life changes most powerfully through personal relationships, and we believe that your church and churches are the powerhouse for forming those relationships. So now, our work came out of, John mentioned, I used to be at the Philanthropy Roundtable. Communio started as a project of the Philanthropy Roundtable, trying to, a big heady idea to see what can be done in a data-driven way to strengthen marriages and families at scale in communities. We raised and spent about $20 million over 3.5 years, and we paid a lot of dumb taxes, made a lot of mistakes, but praise God that we found some things that did work. In Jacksonville, Florida was one of our big success stories. I want to single out some friends who in Florida who really helped so significantly. A good friend, Dennis Stoika, and Richard Albertson, the heads of Live the Life Ministries, who just were phenomenal, both advisors and drivers of on the execution for this work in Jacksonville that we got started. So it was, Jacksonville was the 6th worst city in America for marriage. It had been, before we got started, it had been the highest divorce rate county of all large counties in the state of Florida for 40 of the prior 44 years before we got started. It had never been below the state average divorce rate since the advent of no-fault divorce law. So just keep that in mind. When we came in and started driving resources into the county, it was a full kingdom approach. We worked with more than 50 churches, churches in the Southern Baptist Convention, some of the biggest community Bible churches in the county, Celebration Church, and a pastor there, Wayne Lanier, is just a phenomenal partner. And then the Diocese of St. Augustine as well, a number of Catholic parishes. And in that 3-year span, we went from seeing 300 people going through 4-hour longer couples relationship content to 58,912 in 3 years. 28 million digital impressions. We ran digital campaigns on behalf of churches, serving churches, driving folks who are at high risk for divorce in their community to come in and participate in relationship and marriage ministries at churches in that area. And the results are pretty substantial. The divorce rate dropped sharply, 24% in 3 years. And we had scholars at the University of Virginia and scholars at Florida State University note that there's just no demographic explanation for that decline. And I know what probably surprises you most is that there are scholars at Florida State University. I know John in particular is surprised by that. Anyways, but
all right, easy now, easy.
Yeah, no, anyway, I can, some of us stay fairly immature in our college athletics. So, and I'm definitely one of those. So what we realized is that wasn't, it was big, helping to provide community shifts, but it also, churches grew substantially. In 3 cities where we were doing this work, the congregations that were taking a data-informed approach to relationship ministry grew substantially. Their regular attendance numbers grew by 23%, and the generosity of those coming grew by 28%. So we realized this was good for not only communities, it was good for churches. And what we distilled in that time frame was this framework that our donors are helping to bring this to churches around the country. Our framework is what we call a data-informed full circle relationship ministry. By data-informed, we mean using survey data to understand what's going on in your congregation, and then model data to understand what's going on in the community, to and using all that data to do smart, targeted outreach into the community to grow participation in the church for what we call that full circle relationship ministry. And what there we mean using bleeding edge strategies in every stage of relationship life. We do not, you'll see, we don't author content. We curate it. We advise churches to help you navigate what content makes the most sense for your church. Not every church is the same. Every community is the same. We work with the best publishers, content generators, 34 of them from around the country, evidence-based approaches, more than 85 pieces of content, everything from single life to marriage in crisis and everything in between. So when we engage with churches, there's two ways that we do it, what we call a church platform, where we work and support an individual church. We also have philanthropists that support our work to launch citywide initiatives. We've got 4 of these citywide initiatives going on, none in Florida, unfortunately, but we'd love to bring our work into any new citywide initiatives in Florida, of course. This is something, we talked a lot about data, and I think some of this you as pastors will click on. A lot of us are wrestling with, why aren't millennials going to church? Okay, why are we losing our young people? David had some of that data. We're big into data ourselves. We've funded large academic data sets over the last 5 years, partnering with scholars at different major public universities. And what we find is that family decline is the single biggest factor driving faith decline. Okay, no other factor is more powerful than this. Okay, the religious non-affiliation of millennials is incredibly high. This is publicly available on surveys that are out there, and religious non-affiliation is growing. What we also frequently disconnect in our own minds, there's a big difference between these generations, not only in religious non-affiliation, but in their family structure. It might surprise some of you to know that there is no difference in your frequency of going to church if you're a millennial and if you're a baby boomer. If I know one thing about both people, if I know that both grew up in a constantly married home, they're almost statistically identically likely to go to church. Okay, so I can't put a more a bigger exclamation point on this. If your mom and dad are continuously married as a millennial, you're almost twice as likely to go to church as a millennial who did not grow up in a constantly married home. And what we found, what surprised me, as a little bit of a data geek, is that there's no difference in your likelihood. If you look at those who grew up in a home where mom was never married, or if mom was divorced and remarried, if there was the death of a parent, unfortunately, they were all equally unlikely to go to church regularly. So what all this means is that if we're really concerned about losing our young people, we have to be front and center concerned about marital health. There's no lever more powerful to renew the church and the world than producing a change and a transformation of marital health. And this is what's exciting me. We partnered with Barna a few years back. This is 2 years ago now, on understanding where churches were allocating resources in marriage ministry. And we found that just 28% of churches have a substantive marriage ministry. 80% of evangelical churches reported to us spending 0% of their annual expenditures on marriage ministry. This is, I'm a glass half full guy. This is exciting, actually. It says to me, the family is in a bad spot, but the church isn't fully engaged in the battle. And if we got fully engaged in the battle, if we close this gap in a strategic way, we transform the church, we transform communities, we transform the country in a very short order. And so, like I said, we've spent about $20 million on a lot of, I can tell you all about the mistakes that and things that don't work. Thanks be to God, we found some things that do work. It's the framework that we help churches build out is this data-informed full circle relationship ministry. Think of it like a cake mold, okay? It's a mold. The ingredients, what goes in the mold is determined by the church, and we just advise you in that process. The way that we do that is through these 3 different steps: ministry consulting. We do a full service advanced digital marketing support for churches. And then we're content experts in helping you figure out and navigate what makes sense for your church and your community. Our team has 157 years practical ministry experience on average. Our folks who support churches have 22 years of practical ministry experience. And
So JP, let's pivot real quick because we have limited time. Let's say I'm the pastor of a smaller, medium-sized church, and I want to do an outreach. I want to have a marriage seminar. I want to try to reach within a 2-mile zone communities and neighborhoods outside of my church. What can you all do to help me accomplish the goal of reaching those families within that 2-mile radius?
We'll help you find the felt need, John, in the community. Like, these are 3 types of audiences we can target in the community around your church, okay? And then we'll help you design Facebook campaigns, digital advertisements, direct mail if you want, person-to-person texting campaigns we can do to help you reach out and find folks who fit into these different groups that you want to pull in and invite back into the church. We've set up, John, spun up a crisis toolkit with a bunch of free and inexpensive resources that anybody listening can go to. I think I'd encourage everybody to go to crisis.communio.org. And there's everything from lighter, less meaty date night kits for churches. These are great Christian resources. Some of them are, for instance, comedy nights with great folks like Ted Cunningham, John Branyan, Jason Earls. There's also great resources, skills-based resources for couples to have a fun date night alone or with another couple through virtual, like Zoom opportunities. Ongoing engagement. So we'll help a church track those people, find those people. We worked with a medium-sized church in Tarrant County, Texas, Fort Worth, they got 300 folks to go through their date night, John. 70% of them who completed the date night were not members of their church.
Wow.
They're backflips because we helped them capture first name, last name, email, zip code, and we're helping them get on a growth journey, bringing those folks into the life of that church, helping them with sort of next steps with ongoing engagement resources like the Ted Lowe date night or your best night in resource will help a church. All these resources are white labeled, which means we don't throw Communio's logo on it. It's your church's logo that would go on these resources so that you can bless your people. We want to serve the church and being able to do that. There's a number of other free resources, ideas for cultivating community in this COVID world creatively. And then growth journey content, sort of the best digital content that's out there for couples, for setting up virtual small groups, resourcing your small groups in a virtual age, helping couples themselves with one-on-one resources like Couples Talk that they can do on their own. There's discounts. All this is purchased directly from the publisher. We just curate it, okay? And then even crisis resources. If you're finding couples right now are at their wit's end, I would recommend a great resource like the Marriage Team, phenomenal evangelical ministry that does video coaching for couples in crisis right now, 13 weeks, and you can directly plug those folks in. There's a resource for couples in your church to get a discount through that. So a lot of different ways that we would love to bless and serve churches in Florida and around the country. If you're interested, you can go to that website on your screen, and you can also email me at jdgance@communio.org, or like I say, go to crisis.communio.org.
Great. JP, thank you so much. This is really remarkable. And to see the numbers of churches that are growing as a result of that is really great. You want to switch back from the view here?
I will.
And if Nick Logan wants to be able to join us, that'd be great. So JP, thank you very much. And again, folks, your website is communio.org. And folks can get more information. So I'm very excited about our last guest is Nick Logan. Nick has been a friend of mine for many, many years. And aside from being a world-class sommelier, you don't know what that is, that's fine. You don't need to know what that is. He's also the founder and CEO of Cornerstone Payment Processing System. He started out as a family business, and now it is huge and is making an amazing impact. And so he has been the CEO of major private and publicly held companies. He is a solid Christian man who just had an idea that has exploded. And it deals with basically, it's very something simple, and that's how to process credit card and to do it in a responsible way. So Nick, I'm going to let you take this off since my voice is failing me.
Excellent. Well, thank you for the opportunity. I'm very blessed to be with the other speakers and be able to share with the group here about what we do at Cornerstone. Cornerstone was started back in 2001. I had formerly been the chief executive officer of other companies, and right before Cornerstone, the president of a company based out of Atlanta that processes credit cards. And when the advent of the internet came around, people found out that a lot of unfavorable business sold very well, including adult business. So the company I was working for looked to make money on that adult business and charge people for usage of the adult material. As a president of the company, I had to resign because I was not going to be working with a company that was going to provide access for people to pornography and by way of credit cards. So I resigned and took 2 years off in a non-compete. The company I was working for, the honorable thing they did was pay me for 2 years, and I sat on the bench, and the Lord was gracious. We opened up in 2001, and our focus has been to serve Christian ministries, Christian businesses, and organizations that accept credit cards. And since 2001, this has blown up because today, your appliance in your hand, as the gentleman has been speaking about, that access through the internet can be used for good and can be used for evil. And we believe today that we can use it for good. And we're very blessed to serve some of the ministries that you know across the United States, including Focus on the Family, Family Talk. We work very closely with the Calvary Chapels, the Gideons International, many Christian organizations, including Florida Family Policy Council, Focus on the Family, and groups that just are out there, what I call standing in the gates. One of our groups, Family Research Council, is regularly attacked for being Christians. And what's happened is because so many people are dependent on moving credit card transactions, companies that are out there have turned them off. And I mean, you can research these companies and just put in, and you can see if you just click in that very large companies are saying, well, wait a second, we're not going to let you process credit cards if the message you have, we believe, is hate speech. And the hate speech generally boils down to biblical principles. So I want to show a real quick video that'll explain why it's important who you credit card process with. And I'm not as good as the other people on this technology. Let's see if we can make this work here. That will work. What did I do here? Let's try this.
Choosing a company to process your credit cards is an important decision. The credit card associations have established rules to govern what their cards may be used to purchase. This includes consumer sales, donations, and pornography. Sadly, the pornography industry is larger than the revenues from all the major sports leagues combined. The banks that choose to process credit and debit card transactions for pornography may be the same banks processing your credit card sales or donations. In fact,
Yeah, it's not working, Nick.
Okay.
We're just going to bypass that.
Okay, sorry about that. Well, let me tell you, the easiest way to go and see this is to visit our website, which is cornerstone.cc. And on the website, you'll see that there's a major difference between who you process with today. And the difference is that if you're processing today with an organization that is accepting credit cards, and many of the major banks will accept credit cards, and in accepting credit cards, they actually enable businesses that have pornography or objection material to be able to process. So if a major bank says, well, we want to support our organization that's supporting adult business, supporting the abortion industry, the bank will say, well, we'll keep your regular credit card processing for your church. So if you're doing $100,000 annually in a church, you're actually enabling that bank to do $100,000 in pornography. So it's an offset, it's like a portfolio. And in doing so, you really need to look at who you're processing with. And many of the banks that are out there that are, viewed in the community as very favorable, but many of them are viewed as evil, supporting agendas we don't agree with. So the idea that we put together is that we will only process for God-honoring organizations. We only process for people that are supporting these organizations. And we have programs that include your church's ability to take donations online, sell products online. We have a crowdfunding solution. We have a texting solution. And many of the organizations that provide those services turn people off. As an example, on crowdfunding, we're on with Florida Family Policy Council, and if they decided to support someone and they wanted to have that person raise money, groups out there, such as GoFundMe, would not even allow you to raise money for a legal case. Okay, well, we'll do that. We will allow someone who's standing for the Lord to be able to raise money for a legal case. So we make the decision on who processes with us, and our major goal is to only process for those groups that are supporting ministries or our ministries. And we're so committed to doing this that if you're a church and you'd like to find out about us, we have a website that John can share with you.
Sure.
We guarantee to reduce your processing costs. And
So let me just pivot here, folks. If you want to sign up for Cornerstone, what we're talking about is clean credit card processing. If you're doing business with your credit card with some other organization, go to our website at flfamily.org, look at processing with a purpose, and you can sign up right there for Cornerstone. We've been using Cornerstone for many years. Bottom line is we do not want our transactions and our funds going to fund a credit card processing that is funding abortion and pornography, and not only funding the transactions for those, but they're taking their profits and investing them in into those businesses, into funding Planned Parenthood and other groups. So again, flfamily.org, you can go to processing with a purpose and just sign up right there, and they'll get back with you. We've been using Cornerstone for many years now and have been very pleased with, and their rate per fee is lower than the leading other competitor out there that I won't use their name, but is the culprit here that we're talking about. So want to encourage you to use Cornerstone. Go to flfamily.org and you can sign up and get plugged into the network of Cornerstone, and it's a great service, and you're using your funds responsibly. That's a very important thing. Now, tell me what other ministries, real quick before we close, Nick, use Cornerstone. I know it's gone from a couple to thousands, and so tell us your portfolio real quick. Laser Talk, 30 seconds to 60 seconds.
Absolutely. Laser Talk, 30 seconds. We are blessed to support, obviously, John's work and ministry, the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, D. James Kennedy, which will be down there. We process for Family Research Council, Patrick Henry, HSLDA. We do work with TBN. We do work with Dallas Baptist Seminary. We do work with Reformed Theological Seminary. This is our focus, guys. We process for those people who are supporting the kingdom. And we're so
Family Life Ministry, Dennis Rainey's.
Family Life Ministry, Family Talk. And if we can't reduce your credit card processing, we'll donate $500 to your ministry. And just for signing up, we will donate $100 to your ministry to start. And then we'll also provide $100 to the important work of John's ministry. So we're committed to it. It's what we do, and God is blessed, and we are very thankful for the opportunities we've had.
What is your processing rate? What is the percentage? We're being asked this question by one of our participants.
Sure. Each processing rate is different based on how you take cards. If you're taking them online, you're taking them in public. But I will tell you that if you compared it to one of the big organizations out there that promise to be your pal, we would be lower than their rate straight up. In addition, Brother Dave Ramsey has made a big point for faith-based people to use debit cards. So we have a special rate for debit cards and a special rate for credit card processing. But this is the guarantee. In 20 years that we've been doing this, we have never been able to not lower the rates for the people we're talking to.
That's amazing. That's really great. Nick, thanks for being with us. And guys, this is going to come close to concluding. I did want to, again, just bring your attention to a couple things before we go. Again, the COVID Church Aid website, if you haven't been there, has tons of resources on how to reopen your church. This is a website that we had created and designed, and you can get all kinds of information about how to reopen your church there. There's videos, there's just all kinds of resources on how to think about this. There's other plans that other churches have made and other denominations have made, recommendations by the government. So again, covidchurchaid.org. And you can find all this information if you're still wondering about how the best way to transition in terms of children's church, how to do communion, how to do all the things of being close together once again. So we're pleased to create this to serve the local church again. And then also next week, in our Leadership in a Christian Post-Pandemic World, our focus is going to be basically on how to, the art of neighboring. Dave Runyon, whose work is now spreading across the country, the art of neighboring. We're going to have the governor's basically faith-based advisory person with us. Kevin Baird will be with us, our director of pastoral ministries, and we're going to be having a great conversation about how to really do neighboring. What if we really loved our neighbor the way Jesus asked us to? What would that look like? And so this is a simple but radical concept which could truly transform our churches and our neighborhoods. So join us next week, same bad time, same bad channel, Thursday, 11:30. Even the same link you signed up for will work for this presentation on the art of neighboring. So again, from the Florida Family Policy Council and all the staff at Florida Family, thank you so much for joining us, and God bless you. Please feel free to submit questions, further questions, to info@flfamily.org. That's info@flfamily.org, and we'll try to get an answer for you. I know several people submitted questions online, but we're going to be able to get to it. Also, go to your Facebook page, go to Florida Family Policy Council, and share this video so that we can exponentially get this content out to many other churches and ministries. Thank you very much, and God bless you for participating. Take care.